My name's Kevin Paprick, Chief Architect for SolidFire, and with me here is Riley Johnson, one of the NetApp SolidFire systems engineers, and talking about driving next generation data centers. And where we've seen the industry going has driven a lot of change with the digital growth and mobile economy of going from client server to being always on, always connected has really driven a lot of change in what the businesses have required. And what we've seen here is this choke point being IT and in particular storage. And the easy way to look at this is if you start looking at hard value versus soft value. A lot of vendors talk soft value about proposing this, but how can we deliver hard value? And one way to look at this is let's look at the number of employees you have, full-time employees, and we'll multiply that out by the number of hours you have in a day. Then we can subtract out the number of hours for maintenance, and then the amount of time you're spending for fighting fires. And that's how many hours are left in a given week to focus on innovation and change, to deliver on these new business initiatives and really capture on growth within your environments. And traditional methods of managing storage have just not kept up in traditional IT. And this has caused companies to start looking at bimodal IT streams, shadow IT, or even going to the public cloud for specific applications so that they can deliver them faster, be more agile, and be more simplistic, because traditional data centers and IT have not kept up. And so whether you call it the next generation data center, software-defined data center, or even infrastructure 2.0, the needs and desires are the same to become more simple, more agile, and more automated for your enterprise environments. And one thing to look at here is Pokemon Go. How can you take an application, and do you have the capabilities in place today that you could take an application and deliver it from no users to almost surpassing Twitter in 8 days? You need both the infrastructure in place as well as the policies in place that you can handle this. If you have to do data migrations to handle the increased demand, it's going to take too long. Are you still developing with a traditional waterfall approach, or have you moved to this agile type of development that you can do continuous development, continuous integration, and change on demand? That's what we see a lot of our customers are starting to move to when they're developing new applications to handle these new initiatives. And this doesn't just have to do with enterprises or digital enterprises, but also traditional IT as well. But the challenge is, as customers try to find new ways to deliver IT faster and give more return to the business, a lot of them point to public cloud. And while public cloud can start small and be very easy to get in, it can easily grow out of control. So you see here with Netflix, over 700 million lines in their bill. How easy is that? It's not very simplistic. We have a lot of customers that we've talked to that are moving on to, startups alike, that are moving on to SolidFire because they're getting charged with $200,000 a month AWS bills when they could build out their own private cloud for the less cost than 1 month of their bill, while still delivering AWS-like services, giving that simplicity, giving that type of environment on-premise. And what's changed? With digital growth, mobile economy, a lot's changed, whether you're a cloud native company, like we talked about Pokemon Go here, or you look at the likes of the industry and the companies around here. Look at Target. Target came out with Cartwheel. Macy's has their app. They know when you're in the store if you're running their app, and they can start delivering promotions on site and change on demand. And also, if you've looked at your phone, as an iPhone user, you're getting 13, 10, 20 updates a day. That's not possible with a traditional environment that's only doing release cycles twice a year, 4 times a year. You need to be able to handle these continuous changes on demand and have an agile infrastructure that's also unplanned for predictability. An example there is ATMs. If you were a bank company and you're deploying 100 ATMs, you only need the infrastructure to handle that peak, and you can really easily probably predict what the median value is. Just like designing traditional storage arrays, how much performance do we need? We can try to measure that out. But when you start talking about mobile applications, such as these on here, look at, now you have your Chase apps, your banking apps, you have your hotel apps. Weston's about to come out with it at this location where you can check in from your phone. You don't even have to go in line. How can you handle, though, that unpredictability that you really can't plan for how many users you're going to have today or tomorrow? And so when Stephen was on this morning talking about containers, that type of technology is what can enable a lot of this. That they can spin up from 0 to 5 million, as he gave an example, and spin back down. But you also need the infrastructure in place that can handle that scalability and agility as well. One of the terms we hear a lot is DevOps. What is it, though, to you? Taking two of the most boring teams and putting them together in a room. So now they don't talk at all because developers are traditionally the guys that, it's known that they're not going to have the backbone to really start making decisions. But now there's books out there like the New Kingsmaker that's saying they're in charge and they're taking over. And we've seen this, though. This shift is real, that we're seeing developers take over with things like delivering new things on public cloud. It's made it easier. Talking this morning as well at containers, you can develop right on your Mac. Between open source and these open tools in cloud, you have the tool sets out there that you can start deploying at a very low cost of entry, and you can start doing a lot more. But what DevOps means to me is not all that together. It's really starting to think about business. Right now, traditionally, IT is known as a cost center. And I was talking to a guy last night that's saying, I don't want to move to IT because I like to blame IT on things. And if I had to move there, it's just a cost center. Well, what we're trying to do is do a transformation. Instead of having business run at the pace of IT, let's swap that so that IT is running at the pace of business. And that's what cloud has delivered, being able to run at that pace, giving that flexibility, API-driven infrastructure. And as we talked about this morning, containers rising popularity. This as well, adoption here. What we're seeing is that giving that flexibility. The first slide he had on there, if you guys were in the keynote, was why Docker adoption. This technology has been out there for 20 years, but why now? It's not because they can do everything. It's because they did it much more simple. Very easy to open, just like iPhone. That was their marketplace to get away from BlackBerry. BlackBerry was complex. If you wanted to download apps, it wasn't very easy, so it was always just an email device. And then you get the iPhone with the App Store. Now you have Docker with the App Store that you can just start deploying all these applications, being a very easy button. And that's what we're here today to talk. What's that? Abandoned, like people that, we talked in some of these OpenStack, they started to use the technology, but they stopped. That rate has actually gone a lot less than actually people that have continued to deploy it. We've seen a lot of abandoned OpenStack environments because Ceph hasn't kept up being internal storage, or even because of the complexities. And that's why there's companies like Platform 9 out here today that can talk about simplifying the OpenStack environment to make it much more simple for customers to get in. And when you look at traditionally the way that people develop their storage, develop applications, and develop their environments for applications such as Microsoft SQL, Exchange, or Oracle database, is we've really started from the ground up. And we've started to get away from that physical server per application to being more virtualized so we can virtualize things. But really now, for new application development and these next-gen applications, customers are deploying new development practices that they're not moving from the bottom up, but they're really moving from the top down. So they're developing these mobile applications and digital applications based on automation and orchestration up front. And by having the tool sets and products available that you can do this on-premise in your own environment, you could then break away so that you are ready and that you can stop these bimodal ITs and shadow IT environments by having a more flexible storage platform and environment on premise that can handle both traditional applications while also being there so you are web scale ready for that cloud next generation agile data center. And so where are you at today? A lot of vendors will talk about cloud. What does cloud mean? Cloud is not just having an application or a self-service portal. It's not just that, but it's really policy-based automation. It's being able to handle that automation and have it all key so that you're not having to select all these different parts, but things happen automatically. And that's where we are with this move to IT as a service and being able to deliver hybrid clouds is you need that automation in place to handle it. So as we are here with NetApp SolidFire, what is the relevance of storage in all this? Well, when you look at NetApp's broad portfolio of products, we have a full feature set that can fit in any one of these different tiers and what you guys are requiring for your environments. Starting with the EF series, that we have an all-flash, extremely low latency device that can handle for single applications that need sub-millisecond highest performance, lowest latency response times. We also have our AFF, delivering the broadest feature set for data services across the industry. And then we have SolidFire that can give that cloud-like scalable infrastructure that's extremely simple and agile to not only expand, but also contrast. So you're very flexible within your environment. And so when our founder went out to look at building the next generation data center and what they needed to be cloud-like, we looked at 5 key elements here. And these are the key elements that SolidFire has been built on. Being able to scale out. And not just scale out to where a controller can run out of performance, you have to go to the next one, but be able to scale out compute resources as well as storage resources simultaneously. Being able to have guaranteed performance, so you can stop having single application environments and single tenants and be able to have a mixed workload. And also being able to be fully automated, whether you want to introduce automation in your environment with tools like Puppet and Chef today or not, be able to have that ready for you while also giving you global efficiencies and data assurance to make sure that you're up and available as needed. So why do we talk about this choke point? What's been so challenging and what's changed is if you start looking at traditional storage architectures, there's a lot of time and questions that go into designing out and how you're going to scale. You have questions of how many IOPS do you need? How many gigabytes do you need? What tier of storage are we going to need? Then you have to answer, are you going to use compression? Are you going to use thin provisioning? Do we need to reserve space for different things? And then are our controllers balanced out? It's not very simple. With SolidFire, we break away from all of that. And we have a system that will fully automate and help self-heal and self-allocate storage resources on demand. So now you can pick out how many gigabytes do you need or how many IOPS. And really you can just tell us how many gigs you need. If you need more IOPS, just change the button. There's no data migrations in place. We already spread all of the I/O across every drive in the system. So you're able to just move performance on the fly with no disruption. And then if you need to expand it, just add a node. We're breaking away from that traditional buy 3 years worth of storage and giving you buy for right now. Because as you add a node, we'll auto redistribute it. Completely self-healing, self-automation under the covers. And what that means to you is less time doing these general maintenance tasks and less time doing performance troubleshooting of getting rid of hotspots and putting more time back to accelerate the business. Get IT out of that cost center and be an enabler for bringing on change and transformation. Think about Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola's been a company here delivering soda across the country, across the world. Well, to accelerate this change to the digital economy, what they did is they developed their own supply chain management software. They then started selling it to other companies. So as companies are transforming to this more digital marketplace, they're capturing more technologies. Nike did the same type of transformation. Instead of just selling at the finish lines of the world and the malls across the street, they wanted to be able to capture new users, be able to capture you directly. And that's where they started a digital innovation group that was a shadow IT environment, leveraging tool sets that can then be automated and deliver and break away from that traditional IT. It's really these changes and being more cloud-like that we've been capturing a lot of opportunities to help our customers accelerate their business and bring on more profitability. And we've done all of this while also eliminating the noisy neighbor issues. If anyone here is running VDI, one of the big things with VDI is it has to be on a separate storage device. A lot of times traditional IT doesn't even manage VDI storage. The VDI, that department can purchase their own hardware. Well, what if you had a storage device that it doesn't matter? We can guarantee performance for your critical applications so that you can now mix and match VDI and VMware all on the same machine. That's what Colt Industries is doing. It's what a lot of our other customers are doing as well. They're mixing VMware data, production data, test data, VDI, all on the same device. This is cloud ready. This is next generation data center ready storage. Break away from the silos. Once again, less management, less troubleshooting. And as I mentioned, scale out. Start with what you need. We can start with 4 nodes, so we are extremely small. 4 nodes up to 100 nodes, extremely scalable. But instead of planning out, doing a traditional, VDI is a perfect example. I need 500 users right now. I'm planning for 1,000, might go to 2,000. Well, are you planning VDI users based on new acquisitions that you might be making? Or your VMware environments based on that? A lot of that's unpredictable. And in a traditional storage design, you might run out of compute resources. With us, buy for right now. If you have 500 VDI users, you go to 1,000, buy a new node. We scale capacity and performance completely independently. This also works great with containers. You know, one of the challenges that was talked about this morning with containers was the fact that a lot of times you got all these containers hitting the single block, a very small amount of data. Well, we spread every 4K block across every drive in the system. So you have the full performance of the system without using up capacity. So you can have a 100 gig LUN with full performance, or you can do the opposite. So we're scaling that completely independently. And then down the line, if you need to add a new node for more capacity, we can just add it in. And it'll automatically rebalance the workload in the background.
So I'll interject on this part. I'm sorry for everybody who might not be able to hear the mic here. But thanks. So there's actually a Deltaware customer who added a node last month and asked me to come along. So we showed up in the data center, put the node in the rack, plugged it in, right? Put it in the KVM, add the IP, walked over to a conference room, said yes, add this node, and then we went out for beers, and SolidFire support watched the node, rebalanced the cluster. When it came back from beers, it was done. And that was the node install process. That's why SolidFire doesn't charge for node install. That's why the scalable message of just add the node, all the data rebalances, that's the model.
Thank you, Riley. And you know, the other thing is being able to never migrate again. So Riley said this is adding a node. Well, what about 3 years from now? We're going to be coming out with larger capacity drives. Today we're using just under 2 terabyte SSDs. What about when we go to 8 or 16 terabyte SSDs and you want to quadruple the amount of capacity you need? You can just add a node in. Add it right into the cluster, let it rebalance, then remove the oldest nodes out. And we're also giving you flexibility in your licensing model. If you want to license the traditional way where you have hardware and software combined, we will. It's a single SKU. Or you can do a capacity-based licensing model where you're paying for cost of goods on the hardware. We're really giving that flexibility of a software-defined data center while still giving you the ease of use of having a traditional hardware-defined purchasing model. So you can continue to add apps and remove nodes. You know, another example here is a customer down the street. They had to move a rack of storage, a rack of SolidFire across the data center. And they started planning all of their application outages, how much downtime we have to take. And they called us up to tell us what they were doing. And we said, stop. It's not our best practice. Best practice is actually to stay up and move one node at a time. And so instead, they were able to unattach, just like this up here, remove one node at a time and move it across the data center, plug it back in, and it rejoined the cluster, all online. So instead of taking all these application outages, we're able to do this online. Or think of another customer that we have, one of the large network providers for your phone, that's able to handle the demands of when the Super Bowl comes or when the playoffs are happening. They can take away nodes out of locations that don't need them, that aren't using 100% performance, and move them to where an event is. So when that Super Bowl happens, they can handle the increased network requests and demands that are there. This is having a truly agile, flexible storage device, really changing the way to manage storage so that we can start really capturing on innovation.
A couple more clicks. There you go.
And system automation. A lot of what I've talked about, the array is self-managing on its own. But we also are built from the ground up using REST APIs. Just like customers, we have a large customer base using OpenStack. A big use case of OpenStack is giving that REST, that API interface for new application development. We're giving the APIs directly, so we integrate with things like VMware, OpenStack, PowerShell, and the automation tools. And it's not just about being faster, but it's also reducing risk. If you have two different admins doing the same task, a lot of times you start getting runs that look different. By having it automated and script-based, you're eliminating those human errors, while also giving the rapid deployment. And so when you look at the array, we talked about you pick two things. How many gigabytes do you need and how many IOPS? A cluster is going to be one big pool of resources. And so you can pick here, give it a volume name, how much storage you need, and then we can pick our I/O resources. And if you don't want to deliver on quality of service today, leave it at default. Well, actually, this isn't the default. The default would be 15,000 for max and burst. So we start with a small minimum, and then we can come back and start looking at your data, looking at your applications, and work with you, and use Deltaware to help analyze your environment so that you can get best use, your quality of service for your different application levels. And we do this while giving you all of the API calls, so when you are ready to start deploying automation in your environment, it's very easy to. One of the other challenges that a lot of our customers see with automation, though, is it can bring challenges as well. If you go to upgrade a storage device or a piece of infrastructure in your environment, it often breaks the APIs, and it breaks the code. And it leaves customers in a broken state that they're now trying to firefight and fix the different calls, and where are the problems here? Well, what we've done is we're guaranteeing compatibility. So as we go to a new version of code with new API calls, you can just maintain the lower levels of code. So as we deliver our next OS 9 coming out for Fluorine, you can still maintain your 8.0 API calls. It's not going to break it. And then change them when you're ready. So when you look at an all-flash arrays and what can your flash array do, when we're talking about SolidFires, where we're really changing here is we're getting away from that traditional VDI or Oracle environments where you're purchasing a dedicated device for it and giving you more simplified management by giving that single pool with no forkless upgrades, while also getting rid of hotspots. Because of the guaranteed performance, a lot of our customers are intermixing production and test dev on the same array. Think about this. eBay has limitations for how many IOPS a developer can develop. They know that an application needs 5,000 IOPS. So they'll use SolidFire and make the limit 4,000. So if you're only giving them 4,000 IOPS that they're capable of, they're now having to develop better code. So you can develop better code by putting these restrictions in place while also still having like hardware, like technology for your development, so you're not using different systems for this. And we're also doing this with a RAID-less architecture, and that's what really enables us that we can have these small ones and be able to really seamlessly integrate with containers and OpenStack while giving you that exponential scale and uptime. And so when we talked about this, we're talking about the scale, and we've talked about that you can start with 4 nodes and we can get up to 100 nodes. And so we can start with our very small customers that might have a single application project or a couple applications, whether it's a VMware project, VDI, or something else, and be able to scale this on demand 1 node at a time to come out with clusters as big as this here, where we have one of our online financial firms with 32 or 3.2 petabytes of storage and getting 32x overall efficiencies between deduplication, compression, and thin provisioning. So that's what SolidFire is really about, is really being able to have that agile, simplistic environment so that you're enabled for the next generation data center, so that you can build out your private cloud on-premise much easier, and you're not having to go to a public cloud for everything, for these new application developments, that you can easily bring this in on-premise. So we wanted to stop now and just see what kind of questions we can answer.
Anybody watching questions online? No? There's no chat for them?
I don't know if they have like a Twitter thing they put out.
Oh, no, it didn't put a Twitter handle out there.
I don't know, did you want this and say anything else?
Sure. So, we got 5 minutes, might as well. Nice. 1 second here. Hopefully that's okay. Yeah. So, like Kevin was saying, so I'm the local SE here for SolidFire, and one of the things we wanted to kind of communicate is, as far as scale goes, SolidFire can start with 4 nodes, as little as 16 terabytes of space. As a very easy entry level into the next generation of technology. When you're talking about something that is not using a controller architecture, something that's not using RAID, something that's very API driven, and it's very future proof in terms of this is ideal for OpenStack. It's ideal for things like Mesos and Kubernetes. Our Docker integration is fantastic. So it's very much designed for where technology is going, not for where technology was. But at the same time, it scales to a very small level. I put it in a 4-node cluster 2 weeks ago in a very small staffing firm in Minneapolis a week ago. And we had the whole thing installed up and ready in an hour and a half. And we're in a conference room projecting, kind of showing them, hey, here's how it works. Here's the integration with vCenter. And the response was, the customer said, this blows me away. I can't believe we have something this cool in our data center. Because I was starting to walk him through, if you've got 4 nodes and you've got LUNs on one of the node that are growing and they've got tons of performance requirements, they've got tons of space requirements, and you're starting to get one node that's hot compared to the other 3 nodes. SolidFire is going to automatically redistribute those LUNs without you having any idea. So you are load balancing across your cluster, grow it to 30, 40, 50 nodes. You're load balancing across that cluster. You see it as one giant pool of storage. It's deduped globally, it's compressed globally, and it removes the buckets. And the buckets are one of the tough things about managing storage. When you have multiple buckets, each of which you have to manage the performance and the capacity and what are the workloads that live there, rather than, like Kevin said, using QoS to guarantee people's performance, not allowing this workload to drive that workload off the road. It becomes a much easier, simpler model of managing storage. So you get out of the world of putting in new arrays and then migrating data. The cost of migration is huge. You don't want to be up at 2 in the morning. And just that first slide, it's like I think 5 slides in when it showed all of the tasks that we're used to from storage. Those tasks mean that you're not getting home on time, right? That means that you're missing your kid's baseball game. That means you're up at 2 in the morning, because those tasks are complexity and they're not adding value. SolidFire's model is one giant pool of storage, very easy to scale, easy to life cycle, no migrations. And that accessibility into that cloud infrastructure is absolutely the model and kind of the future direction of the technology. So, anything to add?
I think that's great.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
So, you mentioned Nike, Coca-Cola were interested. So Coca-Cola is already also purchased, I know Nike's purchased SolidFire, Coca-Cola has as well.
I'm not talking about specific customer examples. I'm just talking about these transformations of customers that are starting to use containerized and these type of different deployments to capture the changing digital economy. You know, a lot of people are saying that every company is moving to a software company, and that's one example of Coca-Cola moving to more of a software-based company instead of just delivering product.